Castlevania was one of the earliest NES games that I acquired. To give you my timeline, I got an NES around this time of year in 2008. I'm too young to have grown up with it, but I was fascinated by retro games as a kid. Games were way cheaper back then, and I was so excited to have all these options for such low prices. As a kid, that low cost was so important. I educated myself on the essentials, and I was very deliberate in my purchases of my first 20 to 30 NES games. Castlevania was one of those first purchases. I actually don't really remember buying it, but I have a very distinct story of getting the third one, though that's a story for another time. However, I do remember my first time playing Castlevania. Of course, I had heard of the game from YouTubers who actually grew up with it, and I have my emulator with basically every NES game on it. That's how I was exposed to so many of these great games before buying them. Very clearly, I can remember thinking how good the song Vampire Killer was. Also, I did not know what you have to do when you have to go down the stairs and there's that wall. I didn't see them at all, and initially I was trying to jump the wall. Eventually I got the hang of it and continued on. I likely bought the game from either a play and trade or just online. It was probably a $5 game at the time, and so it was a no-brainer. In fact, it was such a no-brainer that I forget where I even got the cartridge from. The Angry Video Game Nerd videos about Castlevania are always phenomenal. Of course, his first review ever was for Castlevania 2. However, his 4-part Halloween special where he goes into all his childhood memories just may be my favorite AVGN episodes of all time. Back then, he was reliving his childhood playing the games, and now I'm reliving my childhood by talking about his videos. It's like nostalgic memories of a YouTube video within another YouTube video. I'm your future self. I need you to go back and stop the creation of Mega Man 8. This is actually what you'll need. Darkwing Duck on NES, huh? Mega Man 8 should have vanished by now. Why is that here? Why is that here? It's fully here. It's not transparent anymore. If beating Darkwing Duck wasn't the answer, and Mega Man 8 won't die, I think I know what I need to play next. And here I am. I have a literal demon inside of my house now with Mega Man 8. So, I think I found another solution though. We're gonna have to beat Castlevania. Maybe then will my house be fully cured of the curse that lies within. It's a hard game, but we're gonna have to do it. And so much for my future self saying that everything you need is right here with Darkwing Duck. This game used to absolutely rock my socks. I think many people would agree that this is a very challenging game. And it was probably one of the first, really, really difficult games that I played as a kid. In time, I would attempt to beat Castlevania. I often remember getting stuck on the 3rd stage, but then eventually I broke through. Then I would always get stuck on the 4th stage. To this day, I can handle the first 3 stages usually without a single death. Maybe there'll be a silly mistake in there, but I'm very solid at these levels. However, the 4th stage is always a humongous spike in difficulty for me. I'll get knocked off these platforms and mess up jumps constantly. Dude, how'd you miss that jump? It's not that hard. You know what? Why is my future self still wearing a Detroit Tigers hoodie? You know the last time they won the World Series was before this game even came out? One day though, when I was home after my first semester of college, way after my glory days of discovering NES games as a kid, I just got a hankering to play some Castlevania. I breezed through the beginning and I even beat Frankenstein. Quickly I realized I was getting very deep into the game. Once I got past the hallway where the AVGN loses his mind over the knights and the Medusa heads.
You can't even concentrate on attacking them because you're too busy dodging Medusas. But you can't dodge the Medusas because you're too busy dodging the axes. But you can't dodge the axes because you're trying to hit the knight. But you can't hit the knight because the game's driving you.
I knew I had to go all the way. And for the first time ever, I had actually beaten the Grim Reaper. Then it was on to the final stage. And after numerous attempts, getting down Dracula's pattern, lo and behold, I beat Castlevania. At the time, that was my crowning achievement in gaming. I love taking pictures of end screens and putting them together. Currently, I have a working spreadsheet with all the dates of me beating these games and pictures to go along with them. The Castlevania photo is one that I always held on to. It's the oldest photo on the spreadsheet. That picture is from my old Trinitron that I've mentioned before in my videos about my original collection. That playthrough was the only time I had actually gone the full distance with Castlevania on original hardware. Although I may have beaten this game once, it looks like I've been tasked with beating it again in order to defeat the demons that lie within my house. The gameplay you are seeing now is from the Castlevania collection on PC. Real quick, I want to give a huge shout out to my buddy Brian and his channel Crepuscular Sky. He gifted me the Castlevania collection for my recent birthday, and it's the whole reason why I was able to do this video. Him and I also do a podcast together roughly once a month. I used to upload it on this channel if anybody remembers that, but it has since moved to its own, and I'll link it in the description. Given that I am playing on the collection, I have the ability to save states in the middle of a stage. As I mentioned before, I'm not above this when it comes to recording footage. There's a huge difference between playing for accomplishment and playing for footage. Therefore, I don't really count the playthrough of me beating it on this version. Original hardware only counts for me. Call me a purist, but hey, you'd probably be correct in that labeling. As I mentioned, Vampire Killer blew me away as a kid. But there's one thing I wanted to point out about the soundtrack. The Castlevania series is known for remixing songs and continuing their use throughout the sequels. However, the only song that I feel really got popular from the first game is Vampire Killer. I mean, tell me how many times Vampire Killer has been reused compared to Stage 2's theme, Stalker. You probably didn't even know the title of that song. Stage 5 also has an incredible theme that you don't hear too often in other games. Although it's a good theme, it does drive you nuts eventually since getting past the Grim Reaper is pretty much the hardest part of the game. There's not a ton of songs in the game by any means, but they are literally all phenomenal. The song in the pit is a bit minimalist for me, but even that one ramps up as you go. Once you get out of the pit, then you're right back in the same epic songs as before. The Dracula themes are also so suspenseful and just capture the atmosphere perfectly. It's not like a real heavy hitter or anything, and it just adds so much tension to that fight. You have an absolute banger leading up to Dracula, and then the game really tells you no more messing around once you see that staircase. Credit for the game's soundtrack goes to Kinoyu Yamashita and Satoe Terashima. Castlevania is an incredibly early release in the NES's lifespan. Don't forget, the second issue of Nintendo Power was already for Castlevania 2. The fact that this game has such a good color palette for a 1986 release really does say something. Enemies and characters that you need to focus on pop out really well. A lot of early-S games can kind of have a muddy look to them, and thankfully Castlevania is not one. I'll be honest, when I think of Halloween, these games are the absolute first that come to mind. See, in NES games it's okay to be cliche. We have skeletons, zombies, Frankenstein, mummies, it's all super cliche. That's fine though, because if it wasn't cliche, it would just be too abstract. You have to be very clear and intentional with such limited hardware, and Castlevania pulls off a lot of horror cliches without coming off too silly. A complete copy of Castlevania is fairly expensive. When I checked the price, it was actually a bit better than I thought. However, I still just have it cartridge only. Once again, I applaud those who have digitized these manuals for the greater sake of preservation. The Castlevania collection actually has a nice digital artwork section built into it. I'll be using this for my scan of the box at least. This art book is really detailed and is totally worth at least skimming through. We don't have time to go through all of this, and obviously a lot of the sequels are covered here, which we're not talking about today. However, if you have the collection, definitely check this out. Front of the box, we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on the front of the box because I feel like everybody knows this box art, but I will mention that it is really phenomenal. Of course, we have the classic Castlevania logo that they've pretty much kept the same throughout the entire series. It's so iconic. We have Simon Belmont approaching Dracula's castle, and you can see Dracula in the background. Just looks so intimidating. This is a phenomenal box art, and I mean, it has to be part of the reason why this series did so well. So, we won't spend too long on that one. The back of the box is a little more interesting. As you can see, we still have the Castlevania logo, and it says, "Enter at your own risk." That's pretty awesome. One thing I'll mention is that not only does this back of the box have a screenshot from the final stage. There's even a screenshot of the Dracula fight. On the back of the box, they have the final boss. Talk about a spoiler. I feel like nowadays that would be so shunned. So pretty simple box, not a whole lot of text or anything, couple good screenshots, but you know, that logo really speaks for itself. Looking at the manual here, we do have just a black and white manual. This is a super early NES game, as I said, so it's expected that it's going to be a little more on the simple side. We have our lovely Castlevania logo, and then you gotta love good evening. You know, some good text here describing the story and everything. I will note that we have on the control functions page, it looks like a Famicom controller instead of an NES one. A lot of the early games had that for whatever reason. The best part of the manual, though, right here, we have the creatures. The artwork here is phenomenal. Obviously, these are not the in-game sprites or anything. These all look to be original drawings, and you gotta love it. It really puts these sprites into greater life here. So we have the weapons here. Your holy water is really good. Small hearts. Hearts are not health in this game. They give you extra weapons, shots, which are very important. Then what I also love here is we have a little map. And I love that it's stylized to look like a map. It's not just like a screenshot of what's in game or, you know, something that's just kind of lazily thrown together. They have like a little outline on it and the little page folds. I mean, you gotta love that. It's really cool. It shows the path. Shows where the bosses are. This is just awesome. For an early NES manual, this is phenomenal. I already discussed the difficulty spike between the third and fourth stages, but there's a lot more to be said about Castlevania's gameplay. At first, if you aren't used to older games, you might find it ridiculous that you're locked into your jump once committing to it. However, the game is built around this mechanic pretty perfectly, so you might get mad the first time you absolutely whiff a jump on a moving platform, but you have to adapt to the challenge. It's a fun challenge, honestly, and I don't find it to be too difficult to adjust to. It's just a switch that flicks in my mind at this point. I can so easily switch my brain from Mega Man mode to Castlevania mode and know that I cannot control my jumps in this game. Also, there's a slight delay on the whip, and no, that is not a laggy flat screen TV. Even on a television from the 80s, there is still a delay on the whip because it's intentional. You have to master the timing of hitting the fireball projectiles from enemies while also timing in additional swings between them. Another limiting yet fun challenge that this game poses. Also, yes, the knockback is cheap, but whatever, man. It's an NES game. So many of them had that. It's just another challenge to adapt to. I really don't mind it at this point, and I understand that it's just part of the fun. To aid Simon Belmont in his quest, there are of course numerous sub-weapons. Honestly, I've come to realize that the only one you truly need is the holy water. Sure, there are some situations where the axe, the clock, or the boomerang might be useful, but the dagger is 100% useless. Do not tell me about how you beat Frankenstein or the Grim Reaper all because you had the dagger. You didn't. Stop lying. You beat these bosses because you're either really good with just the whip or you had a different sub-weapon. Since I was able to save states in this playthrough, you better believe I held on to my holy water and the 3 symbol. Frankly, I had never experienced Castlevania this way, and it was pretty fun to melt through some of the harder parts of the game with this power-up. The 3 allows you to throw 3 holy waters on screen at the same time. It's not the most necessary thing since the little flame stays around for so long, but it's still good to have. By the time I got to Dracula though, I had to take a death and lose my 3. Thankfully there is holy water in the arena where you fight him. The first form is all whip, no matter what, but the second form is made a lot easier by holy water. Save states can only get you so far though. I still have to beat Dracula. So let's do this and finally rid my house of the curse laid upon it by the horrifying creation that is Mega Man 8.
I guess me cheating and using save states wasn't enough, but I think I have what'll finally kill it forever. First, Mega Man 1. Remember your roots. Next, Darkwing Duck. Pay for your crimes. Finally, Castlevania. Let's finish this off forever.
Peace has finally been restored to my game room. Now I can stop ripping on Mega Man 8 constantly. Nah, I'm just kidding. We'll see you next time.